everyone, and welcome to the NJPW official English podcast. My name is Chris Charlton. It's an exciting time because we are back to business in a unique sense, in a little bit of a different setting. We're in the middle of the New Japan Cup, and we're in the middle of a new project, I should say, getting underway. Fridays, every Friday night, starting July 3rd, Lions Break Collision is going to be a part of New Japan World at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 Central, 7 Pacific. And to talk with me about that today, someone who's been very involved in the whole thing, Rocky Romero. It's good to speak to you again.
It's nice to see you again. It's nice that this is becoming a thing that we do more often. And, it wasn't that long ago when we were speaking about possibility of a Super Junior, and then that didn't happen.
Right. It wasn't. It doesn't seem that long ago, but it kind of was. Like it was like 4 months ago at this point.
Oh, was it?
It was. Yeah. That's one of the things that's been crazy about like this mystery vortex that we've been in for like.
It is a mystery vortex.
Now.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Wow, things are actually happening again, and we're all crazy busy. But but before we get on to Lions Break Collision, have you been watching? Have you been partaking in the New Japan Cup these last couple of weeks?
Truth be told, I watched the opening night because I was so excited for it to come back, and then now I've just kind of been watching clips. I haven't. I got extremely busy all of a sudden, so like it's just having time. So I'm excited, and I also was waiting for all the English versions to come up. So let's see, all the English versions are up. Those are the ones I like to watch because then I miss my pals, you and Kevin, and even kind of Gino, I guess, So I want to watch that version. But the first night was awesome. It was just I couldn't help myself. Even though I told myself I was going to wait, I was just like, nah, I got to watch it. This is the first night back. So excited. And it was cool. It was really cool. So I'm excited to see the first round. Yeah.
Yeah. We're just through, as we're recording this, just through the first round, heading into the second round. And not a bad showing for Chaos during that. Yoshihashi, as we're like going off of last night, where Yoshihashi had like the match of the night with Hiroshi Tenzan, which was
really
a real kind of real surprise. Is showing
how
like
good
a
in
lot
shape
of
how good a shape did Tenzan get in?
Tenzan's like,
doesn't he look awesome?
And Kojima as well. He came up short with Evil, but those guys, that really you can really tell who's made the most of this time.
Mm-hmm.
The third generation guys sort of really came through, and then like Nagata and Suzuki, which was I don't think insane. You're gonna top that for match of the tournament. And
that's awesome. Oh man, I'm so excited. I might watch tonight.
That really came through. But let's talk about Lions Break Collision. Starting up July the 3rd, and you're a part of a good number of those shows. So, this is a weekly thing and kind of a very different concept, even beyond just, okay, these are 4 weeks of matches without people present. But we've been, dealing with that on the Japanese side. And now, here are these American events, without fans, with just cameras there. But I think the presentation is going to be kind of a little bit different to what people are used to from like our usual Japanese output on New Japan World. Can you speak to just like kind of the concept of Lions Break Collision and how it's a little bit different to what people might usually expect if they tune into our regular events?
Right. So, I mean, obviously with the situation kind of going into, opening back up, same thing as they did in Japan, they had to have a limited crew. So, Lions Break is definitely a limited crew, with really the talent is mostly made up of guys that we found, or were suggested, or came through the LA dojo, whether it be a camp they were found or discovered, you can say. And some of them, obviously the Carls and the Clarks and the Alexes were found through those camps and then brought into the dojo. But these certain guys were talented, in different ways. So maybe they weren't exactly ready for to become a young lion, or maybe they had too much experience, but they shined in a certain way, and what better way to give them the opportunity than a Lions Break, right? The Lions Break concept coming from Lionsgate, right? So and where you saw a young talent get an opportunity, maybe against an older, more veteran wrestler. But basically, this is what this whole show or event was designed to be. And instead of breaking it up into, where we would have a usual like 5 to 6 matches, 7 matches on a card, it would be limited to 2 matches, maybe 3 matches, and then progressively growing into a bigger event like you would normally see. So, so it'd be like 2 matches, 2 matches, 2 matches, and then by the fourth week there might be like 4 matches or 5 matches, or something like that to kind of have a big blow off of the event in general.
And it's going to be kind of packaged differently, which I think is kind of exciting as well. You've got this real, I guess, it's different in a way to what we've been seeing in Japan with our events. In that, I think that you're going to see more of, I guess, a studio wrestling kind of vibe
Right.
here, and we're going to
Yes.
be getting things like bringing some of the backstage comments, which we usually see the next day for us, but bringing that into that sort of that tight half an hour or 45 minutes that you might see every week, which is kind of unique,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
As well as like interviews that Kevin Kelly did, but he'll be doing them over virtually, as opposed to being there in the action, so really the precautions were really taken as much as they could to ensure the safety of the wrestlers and the staff. So even having as less people there as possible, I think was super important in planning this event. So which everybody really took seriously, and that was like the number one thing. So um, so with that, Kevin, is doing interviews virtually. He's hosting the show virtually, which is pretty cool to have. But still, you get the voice of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and you still don't get to, you don't miss that. Um, and then as well, yeah, like you said, it's very tight, like studio space event, and you get the backstage comments after the matches, things like that, and kind of just seeing what develops. Basically, it was like threw the wrestlers in there to see what develops. I mean, because there's no championships. It's not about, championships or anything like that, because all the champions are in Japan currently. So, so it wasn't really about that. I think the whole concept in general is like, who can step up, which one of these young lions would take, which one of these young lions or which one of these young talents or which one of these veterans would take the initiative and kind of show themselves in this setting after all these months of frustration that we've all been through and waiting for wrestling to come back. And it was like, let's put them together in some matches and see what happens, and I think that was pretty cool. And definitely some of us fared well, some of us did not, and I think everybody's kind of like coming into this, like we were talking about earlier, like Tenzan used this time to get into really good shape. Some of us did, some of us fell out of shape, some of it, so I think that it's a testament of also where we are following, the last couple months.
Yeah, you mentioned the precautions that you were taking, and that's something we've been very public facing about in terms of we put up our guidelines for how events are going to be conducted here, and we're hoping and praying that we'll be able to bring those fans back to Osaka-jo Hall in the middle of July as well. Was there a lot of communication, between the American side and the Japanese side of, well, how will we prepare for events and how well, because the situation in America is necessary. It's different how it is in Japan
Right.
in the first place. But was there a lot of sort of back and forth, between the two sort of sections there in terms of how to handle these events?
I think that, yeah, there was constant communication because obviously it was everybody's first time back to doing this, right? So I think, watching what other organizations were doing, talking with, especially the Japanese side, speaking with government officials there. The U.S. side was speaking to U.S. Local governments here, and just kind of overall watching and seeing like what certain protocols seemed to work and what some protocols didn't. So obviously the easiest protocol is always to be testing and just staying away from anybody and quarantining, right? That seems to be so. If you have a whole group of people quarantining, then you could you could easier guarantee safety. So that was a big part that went into it as well. And I mean that's just kind of specifics, but I mean it just seemed like the smartest way to go about it. And then but yeah, I know that everybody was kind of talking because it was like an open discussion, and New Japan needed to talk to it because nobody's ever dealt with a situation quite like this. I mean, this is kind of the first time the world has seen something like this in a very long time, and not in our lifetime. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, what we're these are what seems to work. Let's go with that, and then if there's any adjustments that need to be changed, or and everybody had input. The wrestlers were asked, and like, is there anything that you might feel? Do you feel comfortable with these guidelines? And and everybody felt very comfortable, and it felt like it was a great environment. It felt very safe, and if we could continue to do that, I think it's going to be a success.
Yeah. You've done pretty much everything over the last 20 years plus, but like, have you ever had any matches in front of no people before? Was this a first for you?
I've had plenty of matches in front of almost to no people. So
right. That's by design.
Let's see. I mean, yes. I mean, usually, I mean, I've had so many matches too, just in a dojo or in a gym. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't feel much different than that. I think it was easier than I thought it was going to be, because like I had been watching other groups do this, and it just didn't feel the same, right? Obviously, but I think that the way that New Japan wrestlers wrestle and the style of New Japan and the heart and the soul, I mean, the having the fans there is awesome, but like it's secondary to what's going on, because the action and the intensity of you versus your opponent is what really guides the whole product and the whole New Japan way, in the system. So I felt like it just really had to, you're focusing in on your opponent now more than ever. So like you'll see, and I've seen a little bit of the first episode, but you'll see that the intensity is dialed way up through this whole thing. So it's like very, intense wrestling. And, you can really hear the elbows and the chops and the kicks and, and like more than ever. And I think that's very, very important. So like, almost like, I was watching UFC in the last couple months, and seeing how they did their production. And I feel like, there's a similarity there in the fact that like it's become intimate, and the studio is more intimate. It's blacked out, and then you really have to focus in on the action and what's going on between these two competitors. And I think it makes for a really good opportunity for somebody who's young, you don't have to worry about the fans so much too. It's like I can worry about making my opponent like look bad and try to whoop his ass, or something, or or whatever. You can focus in on your strategies and try to win, or try to whatever your objective is. I mean, hopefully you walk into a match with an objective, and I think a lot of guys just wanted to show up and show that they were there, and there was a lot of great talent that did.
Yeah. I think it's been wild to kind of see the. It's kind of become the story of a lot of these matches during the New Japan Cup, is that the people that would normally be relying on the crowd a lot are the people that are struggling to get results. So you kind of have, a Tanahashi that, was being sort of worked over by Taichi, and normally you would get that rally, and perhaps that wasn't as readily coming to him than it would be normally. But it's strange as well that, in these live events, you're hearing the guys in the ring are hearing the announcers,
Mhm.
and you hear that
Right.
come
Right.
through, which
Yeah.
is another sort of must be a very sort of strange layer. But yeah, we are sort of recording these commentary over the top of these matches, which I think is great as well. And
Right.
I'll be there with Kevin and Gino, which is the first time we've worked together since February. So so that's great. And the Japanese side as well. I know Kyono-san's doing it with Tanahashi and with Shibata as well. So
That's
so
awesome.
that's a real
That's
awesome
amazing.
lineup.
That
Whichever
is so
language you're
cool.
working in. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
I just I might sort of rewatch in Japanese as well just to hear what Shibata's
Shibata's
saying.
gonna
But
be like yelling at those kids, like, "What are you doing? Get
right,
in there!" He's gonna be like
right.
coaching from the sidelines.
Yeah. Um, right. So yeah, I think there's four main names that are going to be part of Lionsbury Collision. Part of New Japan for the first time, and then you're going to see people with a little bit of an extra edge to them and a little bit of extra dimension to them. Starting with Carl Fredericks, and by the time this podcast comes up and you'll be hearing it in your earphones, then there'll be an interview with Carl up on our YouTube channel, which is going to head off the first show, and he's sort of transitioning out of that young lion phase now, and
Mhm.
you're going to see a different look to him and a little bit more of an attitude to him. How do you think sort of Carl handled, is handling, has been handling that? Because it's a very sort of strange, unique scenario to suddenly
Mhm.
re-debut in, right?
Right, right. Yeah. It's a great question. I was a little surprised, and taken aback a little bit by how much he has really changed over the last couple months. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to put it. Obviously, I applaud him in the fact that he's taking the ball and running with it. Which a lot of people when they've transitioned from becoming a young lion, from a young lion to kind of the next step, they don't really grab the ball and run from it. There's few. Okada's a great example. I think of that, but like look at Yoshihashi, how long it kind of took him to find
Mm,
his way. You know, I wonder, and like Show and Yo, they had to, especially now he's not having that cushion of the excursion,
right.
so he's going like the Henare route, the Finley route, the Juice route. So it's like, and Juice is a different story, because he came in with so
Mm-hmm.
much previous experience, but just jumping right in. And I applaud him for that because that's not an easy thing. And, I wonder if sometimes you think, do these guys will bite off more than they can chew? But let's see if he sink or swims. I mean, that's what, time will tell really. But, I was very surprised by the whole thing, and one thing I was surprised about is the Shibata influence, the true Shibata influence that I saw more than ever. So maybe taking the away from him of just focusing on like the 10 different uh, techniques that they wouldn't usually use as a young lion. Now it's like implementing what you can see as becoming Carl, but really implementing what you see as something from Shibata, but doing it not perfectly yet, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
technique isn't perfectly there, but doing it with intent, and he's like doing it with like a chip on his shoulder, really.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of somebody who used to wrestle a lot with the chip on his shoulder, and that was his coach, right? So
Mm,
Shibata, I mean, especially for those, I mean, think about it. If you go back in those years ago, and Shibata's biggest gripe was that here's was Tanahashi, here was Shinsuke Nakamura, and it was like he was almost the black sheep. He had this attitude and this thing, and I mean, I remember when he joined the Makai Club. I mean, similar kind of thing. Like he always had this chip on his shoulder that he was going to have to make his way and force his way because nobody was going to lay it out in front of him. So I feel like somehow, possibly, Carl has taken or adopted that mantra, and I'm curious to see how it's going to develop because, like I said, he's either going to sink or swim, or he's going to get eaten by a shark on the way.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah. So the big list of the list of sort of four debutantes during Lions Break Collision, the biggest name of those, the name that a lot of people will recognize is Filthy Tom Lawlor.
Yeah.
And obviously formerly of the UFC currently of MLW, former MLW heavyweight champion. Really, that is, come to think of it, a lot of people were surprised to hear Tom Lawlor's name.
Mm-hmm.
But on another layer of it, that feels so LA Dojo, right?
Yeah.
The epitome of the sort of MMA fighter, now sort of a very got a very competent, very credentialed professional wrestler, but
a very loud professional wrestler.
Very loud, right. But very much a guy that always would have been a fit, and certainly always wanted to be doing this. And a guy that, had he been sort of 15 years younger, or 15 years younger in his career, definitely would have fit in with the sort of Baz Rittons and and those guys going into the original LA Dojo.
I mean, I think that he would be a guy that would have, imagine, like, him being a young lion in the young lion system now, you know what I'm saying? Like he would have been a complete fit, or even, back in my generation, but especially now, I think, you think about what an interesting fighter and personality he is, because he really isn't just like, oh, he's a great fighter, he's a tough dude. He's like a hell of a personality, and a guy who's not afraid to speak his mind, who's got himself into a lot of trouble with that, as well, especially in the UFC. He was always the loud guy that would show up in different costumes and, in different gimmicks, as you could say, and always with a salute to pro wrestling, which is kind of cool. And, so here he is, like, in, an opportunity like that to be competing in a New Japan ring. And I thought, what a awesome idea that, for him to show up at Lions Break. I mean, that's so, like, what a great, interesting way, because like, Lions Break is kind of this different concept, right? So like, we're really not used to seeing much of the MMA crossover into professional wrestling as much in New Japan, right? Like the last bit of it was like, Sakuraba and the Gracies that were, a few years back. But, since then it really hasn't been there, right? Even though it's such a part of our fiber and our past, So I thought, what a cool, great addition, like you said, and LA, very LA Dojo fitting, and,
right.
Antonio Inoki somewhere very going, good job. Perhaps.
Yeah. But I think Tom, when you see him wrestle, he wrestles in a lot of ways, not necessarily like an MMA fighter.
No.
Wrestle, I mean, you see a lot of Shinsuke the pro wrestler in Tom Lawlor, or you might see him bust out something that's very sort of Goto-esque, and like it sort of plays to the fact that he has been such a huge fan of wrestling even before he made that transition to pro.
Right. No, he's not relying on, punch, kick, submission, or anything like that. He's doing professional wrestling in its purest form as well. He's doing, power moves and other things that I think he's a very interesting addition, and somebody that, God, imagine if he aligned himself with somebody like Minoru Suzuki, or even opposed to Minoru Suzuki, how interesting that would be, So, I think he's a guy who could do really well if he wanted to, put himself in that position, and I think Lions Break was a great introduction to that.
Cool. Next on my list was Russ Taylor, a guy who, perhaps if you were, I guess, in that sort of California scene for a long time, then you would know who he was, because he's been around for, even though he's in his early 30s, like he's been around for a long, long time. And if you go through a cage match rabbit hole, you might find that he was on the original LA Dojo matches. He did one or two of those Inoki Dojo matches, but Yeah, I mean, perhaps arguably his biggest exposure on an international scale with these events. But yeah, what can you tell us about Russ Taylor?
Another guy that his style definitely fits that LA Dojo kind of intense, bear style, bare minimum style. Definitely a guy that I've watched over the years develop into, from a young man to, a grown man, really knowing his craft very well. So maybe not so much the fact that he's a young lion or a young talent, but just that he's kind of gone unnoticed maybe by
Mm,
many. So I feel like what yet again here lions break. I mean, you're talking about somebody's break, right? Usually it's a young lion, but in this term it's a veteran break possibly for this guy. And same goes with Tom in our system. It's a break. So hopefully he does well, and this might be a break for him to enter into New Japan or enter ROH or something. I mean, there could be a multiple of options for him after showing like this, and but either way, I'd like to see him definitely compete more in the U.S. and kind of the U.S. Shows have kind of started to create like its own kind of roster and special guests, so like the last New Beginning tour we had Mysterioso, it was another guy who was found, who attended the dojo camps and things like that, and Shibata especially, like a lot of these guys are like guys that Shibata really liked,
okay.
that like he's in it, he's so selective, but he was like, oh, this guy has something, something unique about him, some kind of talent, and then suggested to the company like, oh, this, maybe we should give this guy an opportunity, somewhere. And if they could show up and they work hard and they do, they do their wrestling, well, and compete well, then they get brought back. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see how they're developing week to week or month to month or every tour. Just kind of how like the old days of New Japan was, where you would see like a lot of guest stars coming in, right? Like on
Mm.
every tour. And then you would see the ones that make it and then some of the ones that kind of fade off. So I think it's an interesting time for the US to have to develop their own guest stars, like for many years it was Dragon Lee in New Japan, but then he became, more of a mainstay in the roster, so I think it's just another example of that, which is cool, and it's great to see some of the guys returning back, like Mysterioso, and some new people. Do you want to do the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
one?
sure. Yeah, that's good.
That was a great
Thank you.
lead in, see?
Yeah, there
It's like
you go, right?
I learned something.
Um, yeah, DKC, Dylan Carl Cox, who was only what 2 years a pro,
Hmm.
reasonably sort of fresh in to the business, and not as much sort of on record for him. But is that I was talking to Kevin about this, but like, is it in a sense, does that benefit some of these people coming in where there isn't that track record, where someone like a
Hmm.
Shibata says, I can see something in you that we can work with, and that sort of allows where you're much more malleable, sort of younger in your career, and you can go down sort of that path and realize that potential a little bit easier, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got a lot of room to make mistakes, right? And sometimes that can be really good because I think every time you make a mistake, you choose to either learn from it or do the same thing over again, right? So I think for he has the pressure of like, I have to show up, I have to be there, I have to really show up every night. But he also has it's not a necessary thing for him to have to win, similar to a young lion, right? Like the young
Yeah.
lion's trying to learn and prove himself as much as he can and learn from every single experience that he's out there in the ring, against a veteran. But you've got that little cushion of like wins and losses aren't as important, but as experience, I think at this moment. But like, yes, I'm trying to win because if I do, like, look at Shinsuke Nakamura, for example. If I do beat somebody important, like things that could change everything, You know what I'm saying? Like, look at the how Shinsuke went from a young lion to being IWGP Heavyweight Champion. And quickly as he did. Part of most of it being luck, I think. And having some skill, and just maybe his mind of being like, I respect the way, but I'm gonna go for it either way.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So, and I think that that's the best way to have a young lion kind of go out there. I respect it, but I'm gonna come for your head, as well. And so I think that either way, I think that DKC is a great addition in the fact that he was specifically a guy that Shibata, I know for a fact, really really liked, and had him come back numerous times to come train with him. And I think if he was in the dojo at this time, then he would invite him to get ready with the young lions for the event. So it's like that much so. So kind of cool to see him get an opportunity as a part of Lions Break Collision, and want to see how he does. I don't really know a lot about him, so I'm curious to. I'm with everybody else, kind of discovering him and seeing kind of what he does. I saw a bit, and I can see that there's something there, but it's still very very rough. And that's
Yeah.
from being 2 years in. So see what he can do with it.
Yeah, yeah. And then a bit more rounded is a guy like Danny Limelight, who, from what I see in a lot of those sort of SoCal indies and championship wrestling from Hollywood and that kind of stuff. And, an interesting kind of blend in that you see like the jiu-jitsu from him, but you also see a lot of high flying. So it's
Right.
kind of an interesting combination for him.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy in general. So he was a guy that I suggested because same thing. He had come through a camp as well at the dojo, and I don't know. There's something that I see in him. He's unique. Born in New York, and joins the Marines, I believe.
Mm.
Becomes a drill sergeant in the Marines, and has this career in the Marines. And so he learns hand-to-hand combat and jiu-jitsu and all the submission stuff and then somewhere in there decides that he's going to, on his off days, going to train as a professional wrestler. So he starts to pick up this professional wrestling offense and kind of doing both when he has the time off from being a drill sergeant, which is just mind-blowing. And then finally kind of like you said, doing Southern California indies, doing championship wrestling from Hollywood, but never really, like, I think, devoting himself to professional wrestling. And then I think recently now he's just devoted himself to it. So I'm curious to see how much, if he's all in truly, and because I think he's so talented that if he's truly all in, I mean, he's a beast with the submissions, right? He can high fly, and he's got a unique style. It's like part lucha. He's like super athletic. And I don't know. I think he's just going to do really well. And he's also extremely charismatic, and he's the type of guy who's got a big mouth. So like I think again setting there's no championships here in Lions Break Collision, but setting these guys off with certain personalities. It's like, well, here's a guy with a big personality. Let's see if he gets him in trouble, or let's see what happens, or like, will his mouth get him into a fight later, or. So I think that just a perfect example of, I think, what Lions Break Collision could be, and I think that he's another great fit for it.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, Lions Break Collision at the start, it's 4 weekly events, every Friday night, which is, again, I think that's cool. We're getting like this destination thing of, hey, tune in New Japan World, and it's timeline wise, I think it's not too bad for most countries. I think if you're in the UK, it's a little bit tough, but
right.
Other than that, for
it's like Saturday afternoon or something.
Yeah, Japanese time, it's a Saturday 11 in the morning, so it's a nice
cool.
sort of
Right.
lion wake up late on Lions Break Collision. And then America-wise, it's pretty much prime time across the board wherever you are, sort of 10, 9, 8, 7.
Right.
So it's a great time for that, and it's a it's a really good way to sort of, I guess, get on the ground level of these talents and kind of New Japan of America. I think we're
Hmm.
going to see probably global situations dictate that you're going to see, I guess, NJPW of America really step up. And I think like that's kind
Right.
of exciting as well. Um, Obviously, we're here right now, not exactly sure when those wrestlers that are outside of Japan will be able to
Hmm.
come back here and
Right.
perform in front
Right.
of crowds regularly. But sort of really, what's your take on that going forward? Is this something where we might see sort of more material come out of America natively for the time being? Or is that a back and forth? How are the international wrestlers feeling about like the current situation?
I mean, I think everybody's itching to get back to it. They're really itching to get back to work and just get back to wrestling, and of course to get back to Japan. Um, Obviously, this year was like going to be a huge year for New Japan of America with MSG. So MSG, gets postponed, and now not able to tour really hurts. So it's like, okay, well, um, Japan is starting to up and go. Okay, America, the Lions Break Collision, that was a success. So that I feel like that really opens the door to be like, we can do more, I would think. So I feel that all the wrestlers would be itching to get to, whether it's LA or whatever, wherever this thing goes down, that to do more, whether it's Lions Break Collision or if it's another form or another version of it. I think fans will be happy. I think the wrestlers will be happy to get back to competition. And especially, I think, the US champion is in the US as well, so,
Yeah.
it's not like the US champion isn't going anywhere. So like maybe something with that, maybe the US champion will show up, who knows? I mean, I feel like you never know. So I think, I don't know. I think it could be an interesting time, but I think more importantly, it's a time for guys to really be able to step up, right? This really gives you an opportunity to not have to compete with everybody, but like imagine like somebody like a Carl Fredericks or a Danny Limelight or something gets an opportunity to wrestle against some of these talents that you wouldn't normally wrestle against, or and like take the ball and run with it and go all the way and try to really force yourself into an opportunity in the future, like you could find yourself in an opportunity later down the road or something like that, or and I think it's a great time to shine, even for somebody like myself who isn't in like the top tier of competitors, but I like hear something like that, we're like, okay, well, cool, the it's a little bit of more of a closed circuit, right? So it's like, okay, well, maybe I can step up and get to the next level. I mean, like now we're talking about, there's not really weight limits in this right now, either, So it's like you've taken the juniors and you've taken the heavyweights out of the equation a little bit. I mean, like here's something that could, revolutionize New Japan in a bit as well. I mean, as you're seeing in the New Japan Cup. So I feel like a lot of I feel like could go on during this time, and we've kind of seen like a lot of stuff happen in 2020 that like things start to change or move or progress in certain ways. So it's like, what, maybe this is an opportunity for New Japan of America to progress and kind of make a movement itself internationally or whatever it be, because really watching on New Japan World is a big huge thing, and getting certain talents not having to share the spotlight with other people, they might find themselves in other opportunities, and I think that that's really cool.
Yeah. So that all kicks off, as I said, Friday, July the 3rd, which is going to be a big day, really across the spectrum. Friday, July 3rd in
Right.
Japan, the New Japan Cup semifinals. That's going to be our first live primetime Friday night TV broadcast in 34 years. So that's really huge to celebrate that.
That's
That
awesome.
entire event will be completely free on New Japan World at njpwworld.com. You don't need to sign up. You can go ahead and watch that. That will be in the early morning if you're on American time. So go watch that, take a long nap, get up, and then prime time Lions Break Collision is on. So yeah, so much great stuff to keep up with on New Japan World all the way through July as well. So yeah, go ahead, tune into that, and yeah, I'll be on it as well with Gino and Kevin. We'll have a bit of
I'm
banter.
excited to hear you guys come back. It's very
awesome.
cool.
Okay, all right. So thanks, Rocky, and until next time, go kigenyo, sayonara.